I woke up to the smell of rotting garbage and the sound of Mrs. Farley cackling like a witch who'd just won the lottery. Not the best way to start a Tuesday morning in Brunswick, Maine. But then again, my life had become a series of not the best moments, strung together like Christmas lights nobody bothered to untangle. The clock on my nightstand blinked 6:47 a.m. I dragged myself out of bed, every joint in my 43-year-old body protesting the movement. Through the bedroom window, I could see my front yard, and what I saw made my stomach drop faster than a lead balloon. My mailbox, the one I'd installed myself just 3 months ago, was dripping with neon orange paint. The kind of paint that doesn't wash off easily. The kind that screams vandalism from 3 blocks away. My lawn was decorated with what looked like the contents of every garbage can on Maple Street, and someone had taken the time to spell out "loser" across my porch, using what I sincerely hoped was just mud. "Son of a bitch," I muttered, pulling on yesterday's jeans. My name is Jack Callahan, and I'm a self-employed handyman in a town where everyone knows everyone else's business before they know it themselves. I fix leaky faucets, install ceiling fans, and occasionally wire up security systems for paranoid retirees who think the government is watching them through their toasters. It's honest work, and it pays the bills. Most of them anyway. 6 months ago, my wife Elise decided that honest work wasn't good enough. She wanted more money, more status, more excitement. She found all three in Brandon Fitch, a real estate agent who drove a BMW and wore cologne that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. Elise got the better lawyer, the sympathetic judge, and half of everything I'd worked for. I got this house, the modest craftsman with the distinctive porch that was now covered in filth, and a whole lot of bitterness that sat in my chest like a stone. I walked outside in my bare feet, immediately regretting it when something squishy and foul-smelling oozed between my toes. Mrs. Farley was leaning over her fence, coffee mug in hand, her gray hair in curlers that looked like they'd been there since the Reagan administration. "Looks like you pissed off the wrong person, Jackie boy," she called out, her voice carrying that particular brand of glee that only comes from witnessing someone else's misfortune. "Thanks for the observation, Mrs. Farley," I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice and failing miserably. "Real helpful." "I saw someone creeping around here last night," she continued, undeterred by my tone. "Around midnight. Couldn't see their face, though. They were wearing one of those hoodie things." "Did you call the cops?" She shrugged. "Figured it was just kids. You know how they get around here. Nothing better to do than cause trouble." I surveyed the damage again, my mind already calculating the cost of cleanup and replacement. The mailbox alone would run me $50, not counting the post. The paint on my porch would require a pressure washer and probably some sanding. The garbage was just disgusting, but at least it was free to dispose of. Then I remembered. 2 weeks ago, I'd installed a security camera above my garage. Nothing fancy, just a basic motion-activated model that recorded to a cloud server. I'd put it up after someone, probably the same someone, had slashed my tires. I went back inside, grabbed my laptop, and pulled up the footage. My hands were shaking slightly as I scrolled through the timeline. There, 11:47 p.m. A figure in dark clothes and a hoodie approached my property, carrying what looked like garbage bags and a paint can. The quality wasn't great. I'd gone with the cheaper model because money was tight, but there was something familiar about the way the person moved. The gait, the build, the way they favored their left side slightly when they bent down. I'd seen that walk before, hundreds of times, usually accompanied by the smell of expensive cologne and the sound of self-satisfied laughter. Brandon Fitch. I sat back in my chair, a cold fury settling over me like a blanket. This wasn't random vandalism. This wasn't kids with nothing better to do. This was personal. This was revenge for something I hadn't even done, orchestrated by my ex-wife and her new boy toy. If karma was real, Elise would already be living in a tent behind Walmart. But karma, I was learning, needed a helping hand sometimes. I grabbed my phone and called Mick Sullivan, my old army buddy, who now tended bar at the Dead End, the local watering hole where Brunswick's finest went to forget their problems or create new ones. "It's 7 in the morning, Jack," Mick answered, his voice rough with sleep. "Someone better be dead." "Not yet," I said, "but I need your help with something." "Does it involve property damage or personal injury?" "Neither. Scout's honor." "You were never a scout." "Exactly. That's how you know I'm serious. There was a pause, then a sigh. I'll be there in 20. I hung up and looked at the frozen frame on my screen. Brandon's face was partially visible, just enough to confirm my suspicion, but not enough to hold up in court. Not that I was planning to go to court. The legal system had already screwed me once. I wasn't about to trust it again. Mick showed up 17 minutes later in his beat-up Ford pickup, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the gas station down the street. He was a big guy, 6'2", and built like someone who'd spent his 20s carrying heavy equipment through hostile territory. He had, actually. We both had, back when we thought serving our country would lead to something better than dead-end jobs in a dead-end town. Jesus, he said, surveying the damage. Someone really doesn't like you. Brandon Fitch, I said, handing him my laptop. Watch the footage. He watched in silence, his expression darkening. Mick had never liked Elise, even when we were married. He'd called her high maintenance and trouble. But I'd been too in love, or too stupid to listen. That's definitely him, Mick confirmed. You going to the cops? And tell them what? That I have grainy footage of someone who might be my ex-wife's boyfriend vandalizing my property? They'll take a report, file it away, and nothing will happen. You know how it works here. So what's your plan? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. I'm going to make his life as miserable as he's trying to make mine. But I'm going to be smart about it. Legal, documented. By the time I'm done, he's going to wish he'd never heard the name Jack Callahan. Mick grinned back. Now we're talking. What do you need? Information, mostly. You hear things at the bar. I need to know everything about Brandon Fitch. Where he goes, who he talks to, what skeletons he's hiding in his expensive closet. I can do that. But Jack? His expression turned serious. Be careful. Guys like Fitch have connections, money. They don't play fair. Neither do I said. Not anymore. The next few days were spent cleaning up the mess and upgrading my security. I called in a favor from Sid, the 17-year-old kid who lived 2 houses down and spent most of his time building computers and hacking his school's Wi-Fi. He was a good kid, smart as hell, and always looking for ways to earn extra cash. I need a better camera system, I told him, showing him the footage. Something that'll catch faces, license plates, everything. Sid's eyes lit up the way they always did when presented with a technical challenge. I can set you up with a 4-camera system, all high def, with night vision and motion tracking. It'll run you about $300 for the equipment, plus $50 for installation. Done. Can you have it ready by this weekend? I can have it ready by tomorrow night. He was true to his word. By Wednesday evening, I had cameras covering every angle of my property. Front yard, backyard, both sides of the house, and one pointed directly at my driveway. The footage was crystal clear, streaming to both a local hard drive and a cloud backup. If Brandon or anyone else tried something again, I'd have evidence that would hold up anywhere. I also installed motion sensor lights, the kind that could blind you if you weren't expecting them. And I set up a few other surprises in my garage and around the perimeter. Nothing dangerous, just things that would make an intruder think twice about coming back. While I worked, I thought about Elise. We'd met 10 years ago at a friend's barbecue. She'd been working as an administrative assistant then. Ambitious but grounded. Or so I'd thought. We'd gotten married after a year of dating, bought this house together, talked about having kids someday. But somewhere along the way, Elise changed. Or maybe she'd always been this way, and I'd just been too blind to see it. She started caring more about appearances, about what the neighbors thought, about climbing the social ladder in a town that barely had a social ladder to climb. When she got promoted to HR manager at Tech North, a growing software company in Portland, it got worse. Suddenly I wasn't good enough. My work wasn't prestigious enough. My friends weren't successful enough. Brandon Fitch was successful enough, apparently. He drove the right car, wore the right clothes, said the right things at the right parties. The fact that he was also a smug, entitled bastard didn't seem to matter to her. On Thursday afternoon, Mick called with information, so I did some digging, he said. Brandon's got a reputation. He's been with 3 different real estate agencies in the past 5 years. Word is he's slick with clients but screws over his partners. Also, he's got a gambling problem. Owes money to some guys in Portland. Interesting. What else? He's married. I nearly dropped my phone. What? Yeah. Wife's name is Patricia Fitch. They got married 7 years ago in Massachusetts. Never divorced, far as I can tell. She lives in Boston, works as a nurse. This was better than I'd hoped. Does Elise know? No idea. But I'm guessing not, given how she parades him around town like he's God's gift. Mick, you're a beautiful human being. I know. You buying the next round? I'm buying the next 10 rounds. I hung up and sat down at my kitchen table, my mind racing. Brandon wasn't just a vandal and a homewrecker, he was a bigamist. That was a felony. If I played this right, I could destroy him without lifting a finger. But I needed more evidence. I needed proof that would be undeniable, that would humiliate both him and Elise in the most public way possible. That's when I remembered Janine. Janine Parker was Elise's best friend, a gossipy real estate agent who worked at a different agency than Brandon. She was the kind of person who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it after a few drinks. Elise had cut me off from most of our mutual friends during the divorce, but Janine had always been friendly to me. Maybe too friendly, in a way that suggested she wasn't as loyal to Elise as Elise thought. I found Janine at the dead end on Friday night, sitting at the bar with a martini that was more vodka than vermouth. She was in her late 30s, attractive in a high-maintenance kind of way, with blonde highlights and nails that looked like they could double as weapons. "Jack Callahan," she said when she saw me, her words slightly slurred. "Haven't seen you in forever. How's the single life treating you?" "About as well as you'd expect," I said, sliding onto the stool next to her. "Can I buy you another drink?" "You can buy me two," she giggled, then leaned in closer. "I heard about your yard. That's terrible. Do you know who did it?" "I have my suspicions, but I'd rather not say until I'm sure." "Oh, come on. You can tell me. I'm good with secrets." She wasn't, which was exactly what I was counting on. I pretended to hesitate, then leaned in like I was sharing something confidential. "Between you and me? I think it was Brandon." Her eyes widened. "Elise's Brandon? No way. Why would he do that?" "Because he's a petty, insecure little man who can't stand the fact that Elise used to be married to someone else. He's been harassing me since the divorce, slashed my tires, left threatening notes, and now this." "That's crazy. Elise always says he's so sweet and successful." I snorted. "Sweet? The guy's got a mean streak a mile wide. And successful? Please. He's in debt up to his eyeballs. Gambling problem." "Really?" Janine was hooked now, leaning forward with the eager expression of someone who'd just been handed premium gossip. "How do you know?" "I have friends who know things." "Look, Janine, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but," I paused for effect, "Brandon's not who he says he is. He's hiding things, big things." "Like what?" "I can't say more right now, but if you hear anything at all, about him, I'd appreciate a heads up. I'm trying to build a case for a restraining order." She nodded eagerly. "Of course. You know I'm on your side, Jack. I always thought Elise treated you badly." "Thanks. That means a lot." I bought her 2 more drinks, steered the conversation to safer topics, and left her with the seeds of doubt firmly planted. By tomorrow, half the town would know that Brandon Fitch was a gambler with secrets. The truth would spread like wildfire, mixed with speculation and exaggeration until it took on a life of its own. Small towns are beautiful that way. The weekend passed quietly. Too quietly. I knew Brandon and Elise were planning something. I could feel it the way you can feel a storm coming before the first drops of rainfall. On Monday morning, I got my answer. I was working on a kitchen renovation for the Hendersons, an elderly couple on Oak Street, when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from my security system. I pulled up the app and watched as Brandon's BMW pulled into my driveway. He sat there for a moment, looking around nervously, then got out of the car. He was wearing jeans and a dark jacket, not his usual real estate agent uniform. He walked up to my porch, tried the door, found it locked, then moved around to the side of the house. I'd left my garage door unlocked deliberately, with a box labeled Divorce Files, Elise, sitting prominently on my workbench. It was bait, and Brandon took it like a starving fish. I watched through the camera feed as he entered my garage, looked around, and spotted the box. He opened it, started rifling through the papers inside. Old bills, random documents, nothing important. While he was distracted, I triggered the surprise I'd set up. Every light in the garage blazed on at once, accompanied by a deafening alarm that I'd rigged to a motion sensor. Brandon jumped about 3 feet in the air, dropped the papers, and ran for the door. But I'd also rigged a magnetic lock that engaged when the alarm went off. He was trapped. For about 30 seconds. I'd set the lock to release automatically because I didn't want to actually kidnap the guy, just scare him. But those 30 seconds were glorious. I watched through the camera as Brandon panicked, pulling at the door, looking around wildly, probably imagining me coming at him with a hammer or something. When the door finally released, He burst out and ran to his car so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. He peeled out of my driveway, leaving rubber marks on the pavement, and leaving his wallet on my garage floor. I finished up at the Hendersons' place, drove home, and retrieved the wallet. Inside was Brandon's driver's license, 3 credit cards, and a business card from a casino in Connecticut. There was also a receipt from a jewelry store in Portland, dated last week, for a diamond bracelet that cost more than my truck. I photographed everything, then called Mick. "I need you to spread some information for me," I said. "Can you let it slip at the bar that Brandon Fitch was seen breaking into my garage? Make sure Detective Harrow hears about it. Consider it done. Anything else?" "Yeah. Find out if Elise got a diamond bracelet recently. I have a feeling Brandon's been buying her expensive gifts he can't afford." On it. Detective Harrow showed up at my house that evening. He was a gruff man in his 50s, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and a personality to match. He lived 3 houses down and had never been particularly friendly. But he was honest, which was more than I could say for most cops. "I heard you had some trouble," he said, standing on my porch with his arms crossed. "Someone broke into my garage today," I confirmed. "I have it on video." I showed him the footage. His expression didn't change much, but I saw his jaw tighten when Brandon's face became visible. "That's Brandon Fitch," he said. "Yes, it is. You want to press charges?" "Not yet. I want to see what else he's going to do. But I wanted you to be aware of the situation, in case things escalate." Harrow nodded slowly. "You're playing a dangerous game, Callahan." "I'm protecting my property." "Uh-huh. Well, don't do anything stupid. And if you need help, call me." "Not after the fact. During. Will do." He left, and I felt a small sense of satisfaction. Now there was an official record, a witness, someone who could corroborate my story if things went sideways. I was building my case brick by brick, making sure everything was documented and legal. Because when I finally brought Brandon and Elise down, I wanted it to be permanent. The next phase of my plan involved social engineering. I needed to turn public opinion against them, to make them pariahs in a town that thrived on reputation and gossip. I started small. A comment here, a suggestion there, always careful to seem reluctant, like I was sharing information against my better judgment. I told the clerk at the hardware store that I'd had to upgrade my security because of some trouble with my ex's new boyfriend. I mentioned to the Hendersons that I was worried about further vandalism. I let Mrs. Farley overhear a phone conversation about Brandon's gambling debts. Within a week, the rumors were everywhere. At the grocery store, at the post office, at the dead end. People started looking at Brandon differently when he showed up at open houses. Clients started asking questions. His boss at the real estate agency started getting concerned calls. Elise's reputation took a hit too. People started wondering what kind of person would date a man who vandalized her ex-husband's property. Her friends at Tech North started distancing themselves, worried about being associated with drama. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. I wanted them to feel the same helplessness, the same humiliation that I'd felt when Elise served me divorce papers at my own birthday party, in front of all our friends. That's when I learned about Lobsterfest. Lobsterfest was Brunswick's annual summer celebration, a weekend-long event that drew people from all over the county. There were food vendors, live music, games, and a general atmosphere of small-town festivity. Everyone went. Everyone saw everyone. It was the perfect stage for a public confrontation. I spent 2 weeks preparing. I gathered evidence, compiled documents, and practiced what I was going to say. I also reached out to someone I thought might be interested in what I'd discovered. Patricia Fitch, Brandon's actual wife. Finding her was easy enough. A quick search on social media turned up her profile, complete with photos of her and Brandon from years ago, back when they looked happy. I sent her a carefully worded message. "Hi, Patricia. You don't know me, but I have information about your husband Brandon that I think you should know. He's been living in Maine and representing himself as single. I have proof. If you're interested, please call me." She called within an hour. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice tight with anger or fear or both. "My name is Jack Callahan. I live in Brunswick, Maine. Your husband has been dating my ex-wife and harassing me. I didn't know he was married until recently." There was a long silence. Then, "That son of a bitch. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you. Are you sure it's him? Brandon Fitch, real estate agent?" "I'm sure. I can send you photos, documentation, everything." "Send it." I did. Within minutes, she called back. I'm coming to Maine, she said. When can I meet you? There's a town festival this weekend, Lobster Fest. If you want to confront him publicly, that would be the time. I'll be there. Lobster Fest started on Friday evening with a street fair on Main Street. The smell of seafood and fried dough filled the air, and the sound of a local band playing cover songs drifted through the crowds. I walked through the festival, keeping an eye out for Brandon and Elise. I found them at a beer garden, sitting at a picnic table with Janine and a few other people I recognized from around town. Elise was wearing a sundress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, and Brandon had his arm around her shoulders in a possessive way that made my skin crawl. I didn't approach them, not yet. Instead, I found Mick, who was working a shift at the Dead Ends beer tent. Everything set? I asked. Yep. Janine's got the video file on her phone. She thinks it's just security footage you wanted to share. She has no idea what's actually on it. Perfect. And Patricia? She's here. I saw her about 20 minutes ago, near the lobster roll stand. She looks pissed. Good. Let's give this another hour, let everyone get a few drinks in them, and then we'll start the show. The hour passed slowly. I wandered through the festival, my heart pounding, my mind running through everything that could go wrong. But I'd planned this carefully. I'd covered my bases. This was going to work. At 8 o'clock, I made my move. I walked up to the beer garden, where Elise and Brandon were still sitting, now visibly drunk and laughing too loud. Janine was with them, along with about a dozen other people. Hey, Elise, I said, my voice carrying across the table. Brandon. The laughter stopped. Elise's face hardened. What do you want, Jack? I just wanted to thank you both. For the vandalism, the harassment, all of it. Really made me feel welcome in my own home. Brandon stood up, swaying slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I have video of you breaking into my garage. Want to see? People at nearby tables were starting to pay attention now, turning to watch the confrontation. You're delusional, Elise said, but her voice wavered slightly. Am I? Janine, could you pull up that video file I sent you? The one labeled security footage? Janine, looking confused but eager to be part of the drama, pulled out her phone and opened the file. Her eyes widened as she watched. Oh my God, she said. Brandon, is this you? Let me see that, someone else said, leaning over her shoulder. Then another person, and another. Within seconds, a crowd had gathered around Janine's phone, watching the crystal clear footage of Brandon breaking into my garage. This is bullshit, Brandon said, his face turning red. That's not. I wasn't. You weren't what? I interrupted. Trespassing, breaking and entering? Because that's sure what it looks like. Jack, you need to leave, Elise said, standing up. You're making a scene. Oh, I'm making a scene. That's rich, coming from someone who orchestrated a campaign of harassment against her ex-husband. I didn't do anything. Really? Because Janine told me you were bragging about it. Said it was payback for my attitude during the divorce. Janine's face went pale. It's okay, Janine. I don't blame you. You were just being honest. The crowd was growing now, people pressing in to hear what was happening. I saw Detective Harrow at the edge of the group, watching with his arms crossed but making no move to intervene. That's when Patricia Fitch pushed through the crowd. Brandon, she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. What the hell is going on? Brandon's face went from red to white in about 2 seconds. Patricia, how did I find out you've been living a double life in Maine? That you've been pretending to be single and dating this woman? She pointed at Elise. Someone with a conscience told me. The crowd gasped. This was better than anything on television. Elise looked between Brandon and Patricia, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. What is she talking about? Who is this? I'm his wife, Patricia said coldly. We've been married for 7 years. Who the hell are you? His what? Elise stumbled backward, her hand going to her mouth. Brandon, tell me she's lying. Brandon looked like he wanted the ground to open up and swallow him. Patricia, I can explain. Explain what? That you abandoned me. That you've been living here, selling real estate, and playing house with another woman? That you're a bigamist? The word bigamist rippled through the crowd like electricity. People pulled out their phones, recording, texting, calling their friends. This was going to be all over town by morning. You bastard, Elise said, and slapped Brandon across the face so hard the sound echoed across the beer garden. Brandon reeled, then tried to run. But he was drunk and panicked, and he didn't see the puddle of spilled beer on the ground. His feet went out from under him, and he went down hard, landing face first in a plate of lobster rolls that someone had left on the ground. The crowd burst into laughter. Someone shouted, "Looks like he dropped his dignity," and the laughter got louder. I stood over Brandon, looking down at him covered in butter and breadcrumbs. "You should have left me alone," I said quietly. "You brought a butter knife to a chainsaw fight." Detective Harrow finally stepped in, helping Brandon to his feet. "I think you folks should call it a night," he said. But there was a hint of amusement in his voice. Elise tried to call the police, but Harrow just shook his head. "Maybe you should go home, Elise. Sleep it off." She looked around at the crowd, at the phones recording her humiliation, at Brandon dripping with lobster butter, and burst into tears. She pushed through the crowd and disappeared into the night. Brandon tried to follow her, but Patricia blocked his path. "You're not going anywhere," she said. "We need to talk, with lawyers." I walked away from the scene, my heart still pounding but a smile on my face. It wasn't over yet. There was still more to do. But this was a good start, a very good start. Noise, the fallout from Lobsterfest, was immediate and devastating. By Saturday morning, the video of Brandon's public humiliation had been shared hundreds of times on social media. The local newspaper ran a story about the dramatic confrontation at the festival. Brandon's boss at the real estate agency called him in for a meeting and, according to mixed sources, fired him on the spot for ethical violations and bringing the company into disrepute. Elise didn't fare much better. Someone at Tech North saw the videos and forwarded them to HR, her own department. By Monday, she was called into a meeting with her boss and given a choice: resign quietly or be terminated for conduct unbecoming of an HR manager. She resigned. But I wasn't done. Not even close. On Tuesday, I filed a formal police report about the vandalism, backed up by my security footage and Detective Harrow's statement. I also filed a civil lawsuit against Brandon for property damage, trespassing, and harassment. The damages I was seeking weren't huge, about $5,000. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the public record, the official acknowledgement that I'd been wronged. I also filed for a restraining order against both Brandon and Elise, citing the pattern of harassment and the threat to my safety. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, granted it immediately. But the real coup came from Patricia Fitch. She filed for divorce in Massachusetts, citing abandonment and bigamy. She also filed criminal charges against Brandon for fraud and bigamy. The case made the news in Boston, and somehow, I may have helped this along by sending anonymous tips to reporters. It got picked up by a few regional outlets. Brandon Fitch, the slick real estate agent with the BMW and the expensive cologne, became a cautionary tale, a joke, a pariah. And Elise, by association, went down with him. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved out of her upscale townhouse, couldn't afford the rent without her job, and was living with her mother in Lewiston. Brandon had disappeared entirely, probably back to Massachusetts to deal with his legal troubles. But I wanted one final confrontation, one last moment to look them in the eye and let them know exactly what they'd lost. I got my chance in late August. I was at the hardware store, picking up supplies for a job, when I saw Elise's car in the parking lot. She was sitting in the driver's seat, staring at her phone, and she looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes rumpled, and she had dark circles under her eyes. I walked over and tapped on her window. She looked up, and for a moment I saw fear in her eyes. Then it turned to anger. She rolled down the window. "What do you want, Jack? I just wanted to see how you were doing. Heard you've had a rough couple of months." "Go to hell. Already been there. It was called our marriage." She glared at me. "You did this. You ruined everything." "I ruined everything? That's interesting. Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who cheated, who lied, who orchestrated a campaign of harassment against me. All I did was defend myself. You humiliated me. You destroyed my career, my reputation, everything I worked for. No, Elise, you did that to yourself. You chose to date a married man. You chose to vandalize my property. You chose to make my life hell. I just made sure everyone knew the truth." Tears started streaming down her face. "I hate you, I know. But here's the thing. I don't hate you. I don't feel anything for you anymore. You're just a stranger who used to sleep in my bed. And that's the worst punishment of all, isn't it? Knowing that you don't matter to me anymore." I walked away, leaving her crying in her car, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no sadness, just a cold, empty indifference. It was over. The final act came in September, when I received notice that my lawsuit against Brandon had been settled. He'd agreed to pay the full amount plus legal fees, probably to avoid further publicity. The restraining orders were made permanent. I used the money to finish renovating my house. New paint, new mailbox, new landscaping. I erased every trace of Elise from the property, every memory of the life we'd tried to build together. On a cool evening in late September, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching the sun set over Brunswick. Mrs. Farley was in her yard, pretending to water her plants, but actually watching me. "House looks good, Jackie," she called over. "Thanks, Mrs. Farley. You doing okay, after everything?" I thought about it. Was I okay? I'd lost my wife, spent months being harassed, and had to fight tooth and nail to reclaim my dignity. But I'd won. I'd beaten them at their own game, using nothing but patience, intelligence, and a willingness to play the long game. "Yeah," I said. "I'm doing okay." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her fake watering. I sat there as the sky turned from orange to purple to black, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car drove past, its headlights cutting through the darkness. My phone buzzed with a text from Mick. "Drinks tomorrow. First round's on me." I smiled and texted back. "Make it 2 rounds, and you've got a deal." Life was moving forward. The nightmare was over. I'd been tested, pushed to my limits, and I'd come out the other side stronger, harder, more careful about who I trusted. But I'd also learned something important. Revenge doesn't have to be loud or violent or illegal. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone destroy themselves while you watch from a safe distance, armed with evidence and a good security camera. As I finished my beer and stood to go inside, I looked at my house, not ours, and felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The porch was clean, the yard was pristine, and the cameras were recording everything, just in case. I'd built something here, something that was mine, and nobody was going to take it away from me again. I walked inside, locked the door behind me, and set the alarm. Tomorrow I had a kitchen to renovate, a fence to repair, and a life to live. But tonight, I was just going to sleep. For the first time in months, I knew I'd sleep well. The house was finally quiet, and so was my soul.